and welcome to Look for the Light, a podcast where we dive into the world of The Last of Us. I'm your host, Stuart Trainer, and I'm joined, as always, by someone who would absolutely love a super fucking purple coat. It's Jess Sterling. Jess, how are you doing?
I thought you were going to say who would love to raise sheep on a farm, which could be true.
Would you?
Maybe not sheep. I feel like sheep smell.
Yeah, I mean, well, all animals smell.
Not all animals.
Name an animal that doesn't smell, and I will
Dogs.
absolutely argue. Dogs
They smell good. They smell good.
No, they smell like wet dog, which
Only
is
if
like
they're
what
wet.
everyone says. But they often are.
Anyway, I do like purple coats, and I'm really excited to talk about this episode.
Fantastic. Well, I'm super excited to talk about this episode. This one I've been kind of dreading for a while because it's sad, but not in a completely different way to the last episode, because it's like a completely different sense of like just emotional kind of like gut wrenching. But as much as I want to dive into this, I kind of also have to get some excitement out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
Season 2 is gonna be out April 13th, and the hype train is woo woo, it's going. I can't wait for this. We're gonna have a 2-week break between our coverage of season 1 and when we finish up with that, in which we're going to be diving into all things The Last of Us Part 2, which is the second game. We're going to have like full spoiler chat about kind of what there is coming up and everything. And then we're also going to do things like break down the trailers, go through all the photos, all of like the set news and who's been cast in particular roles and what these particular roles are, which I'm so excited to jump into when we finally get to that. But April 13th is when season 2 is going to start, and you best believe our coverage will be out rapidly after those ones. So, of course, this is a great time to subscribe if you haven't already. You can subscribe to us at Look for the Light Podcast. Search on any and all podcatchers. You can find us on social media at Look for the Light Pod, and you can also email in any feedback at lookforthelightpodcast@gmail.com, and we will dive into absolutely everything. As always, hang around at the end for the spoiler chat. We'll try and keep everything contained to everything up to this episode and this episode only for this chat, but we'll cover spoilers at the end. So unless there's anything else, Jess, you could dive into this episode.
Let's do it.
Anywhere people used to be, you can't go there no more.
So you haven't heard the name Tommy?
Nope.
What about the Fireflies?
We get those in the summer.
Not the bugs, the people.
There are firefly people?
You got any advice on the best way west?
Yeah. Go east.
We open in Wyoming with Joel and Ellie on the road, and this is so brilliant because this is something that came up in the video game where there was like concept art released, and it was Joel and Ellie around the campfire, and it was a scene that everyone was hoping to get like in the game and never really manifested because really there's not much of a reason to have a scene with them just out on the road together around a campfire and telling stories and stuff like that. So we finally get this kind of real sense of these two traveling and the full extent of like the journey, and we get them hiking, going through the wilderness of Wyoming, and coming across this poor remote couple who have decided to get away from it all and have been besieged upon by Joel and Ellie. What did you think about this?
I love Marlon and Florence. They're icons. They're just so funny and unexpectedly so, right? Like, we're 3 months later, so we know Joel and Ellie have had 3 more months of bonding. It's winter, everything is covered in snow, and I just love the husband and wife's back and forth. You could tell they've been married for a long time because the husband walking in and being like, "Who's this guy?" She's like, "He didn't hurt me, by the way."
He's like,
I got eyes. It's so good. And who's this little psycho? Like, it's so funny. And I love Florence's giddiness at Ellie's attitude. Like, she just seems like tickled pink by Ellie.
Yeah.
And they're Firefly people. Like, they're so remote, and they obviously were very remote prior to Outbreak Day. So they don't even know the state of the world. They obviously know that there are infected and there are
Hmm.
people that they should be concerned with, but they're so far removed from society and a larger community that they don't know the Fireflies exist. They don't know about the QZs. All they know is their little home where they stay, and there's a river of death, and they don't cross the river of death, and you never go west, only east.
Good advice. I mean, if there's a river and it's referred to as the River of Death, probably best not to cross it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I love the fact that he comes in so incredulous, that like the situation is like, you made them soup? And she's like, well, yeah. Like as if it's just
They were
the
hungry.
normal thing. Yeah, exactly. You like they come in, do the captive. And this is a great touch as well because Joel does a technique that is used later on, and is something that is kind of definitely worth paying attention, where he gets someone to name or like reveal information in private and then asks the second person it directly in public and says these answers better match. And it's a great way of determining truth in a world where you can't trust people like at all. You've got to
Mhm.
like do things like this. And it shows the extent of Joel's training, his acumen with dealing with this world, is that he has techniques like this to ensure that he is being told the truth. It's kind of
Mhm.
so it's a very subtle way of showing that Joel has like he's not got just techniques. He's got some like real, I think, ruthlessness and a bit of smarts when it comes to that stuff.
Yeah, he has street smarts. We know he's not necessarily book smart. He doesn't know how what is it called when you steal gas from from another car. He doesn't know
Oh, the
like the
siphoning, yeah,
science. Siphoning. He doesn't know the science behind siphoning, but he knows the street smarts of how to get information out of people, right? He's had a lot of years of practice in this. And
hmm,
I love that this couple, they're very innocent, right? Like I'm sure, you know, Marlon would have shot Joel immediately if Joel didn't have a gun aimed at his wife. But then they're
yeah,
pretty forthcoming with the information. They're like, "Hey, just don't go east or don't go west and you'll be all good." And Ellie steals one of their rabbits on the way out. And we get Joel's first panic attack that we've seen,
yeah,
at least. We don't know if he's prone to them prior to any of these occurrences. Um, but gosh, it's so I don't often relate to Joel. I find that I don't have a ton in common with Joel. The panic attacks, though, my God, I feel for him. Panic attacks are horrible without having the weight of the world on your shoulders and a child saying, "What's going on? Are you okay? I'm effed without you. Like, what are you
yeah,
doing?" That's not helping. Not that Ellie knows what's going on, but seeing Joel have his first panic attack, which isn't present in the game, this is a show uh inclusion. I love it. It makes a ton of sense.
yeah. It rounds out Joel. It softens him a little bit. It doesn't make him this kind of caricature like kind of tough guy, and like even tough people they have mental health issues, and entirely in this world I think it's undeniable that mental health is going to play a huge factor. Like Joel absolutely has some extent of PTSD surrounding like the loss of Sarah. It'd be surprising if he didn't. And the manifestation of panic attacks is a great way of kind of just showing the extent to which this world plays upon those kind of worries and concerns. Joel would be, I think, abnormal to not be anxious in this situation when he is in the protection of someone who is absolutely vulnerable and he is the one and only thing stopping them from dying. And he is feeling lost. He's feeling powerless. It feels like he's failing constantly, which has been a theme that's been brought up in the last like few episodes of just seeing constant failure and feeling as if he's failing. And so it absolutely makes sense. And I thought the way in which it was shot with the kind of like the ringing and like kind of the like really close up camera shot, because that's kind of I think how it feels sometimes that you kind of get a little almost tunnel visioned in on yourself and you can't focus on anything else, which is why you can't take your mind off of like breathing rapidly and kind of take control of the situation. I thought that was brutal in how it was portrayed, but kind of honest, which is, I think, really good to experience.
Mhm. Yeah, your mind has an extraordinary ability to affect the way your body reacts to things. And so having him feel out of control and have it manifest in a panic attack, which feels extremely out of one's control to, change, stop, affect. It's brilliant. It makes so much sense that Joel would be feeling this way, both because he's afraid that something will happen to Ellie and that he is failing her time and time again and being able to protect her. And also, I do feel like there's an aspect to we're getting closer to Wyoming. We're potentially getting closer to parting ways and for me to
Hmm.
hand over Ellie. And I do think there is an underlying hint of that also scares him now that he is so closely bonded with her. The idea of going their separate ways, that's tough to think about. Um, and like you mentioned this campfire scene earlier and how it was like a storyboard for the game, and
Hmm.
I love this. I love this little moment between them where they talk about their kind of dreams for the future and the Sally fucking ride, right? Like that entire thing where Ellie does have dreams of being an astronaut. They finally feel like they have hope where they both
Hmm.
are able to kind of talk about what they would be doing if not for what they're going to do after this trip. And Ellie admitting that she's afraid of failure too because she wasn't able to save Sam.
Yeah.
It's brutal.
That revelation that like in telling Joel, I think it says so much about the progression of their relationship. Firstly, they're divulging their kind of hopes, which I think is somewhat kind of letting a barrier down because it's like you don't want someone else to laugh at what your hopes are after
Mhm.
this, even though Ellie kind of does laugh at Joel's, which is just such a teenage thing to do. But equally, it's kind of like it just shows that they would never have a conversation like this before. Like she was Cargo before. Now she is Ellie, and she has hopes that he is hearing and understanding. And Ellie feels safe enough to then tell Joel that she knew that Sam had been bit and that she tried to help him. And again, this doesn't help Joel's situation in hearing that she's had more, like she's seen more atrocities because he hasn't been able to protect her from that. Which I don't think that. I mean, she doesn't say it in a malicious way. She almost like kind of reveals it as like a bad secret that she kind of needs to get off her chest. And Joel is just there to listen. So I don't think she's fully aware that she's adding a little bit more emotional baggage onto Joel's already beleaguered back. But Joel kind of doesn't judge or anything. And Eddie's really candid in the fact that she just wanted to help and she
Mhm.
thought she could. And I think this is also really kind of well layered because they keep referencing her blood throughout this episode. She even talks about it later on when she like when they're speculating about what they're going to do after, and she's like, "Well, once they get my blood out of me, and they can find a cure from that," and it relays this whole thing of well, that's what it is that's containing her cure. But she's also kind of perhaps sowing a slight seed of doubt into Joel's head as to whether or not, well, if it isn't the blood that worked there, then what is this? Like, what is there that we need to understand about this whole situation? So there's a lot of stuff going on in all of this, which is again a testament to some really quality writing. That the fact that what seems like to be a really simple conversation actually has about three different layers of different things going on at the same time.
It does. And when Joel says he's going to keep both watches, right? He's going to be the one staying up all night to keep watch for them. Yet again, he feels like he fails in that he falls asleep, which is a human thing to do. He's tired. They're not only traveling, they're traveling in the dead of winter, and he has so much responsibility on him. And it's kind of silly, but panic attacks, anxiety make you exhausted. Like that's without all of everything else going on. He is
Hmm.
exhausted and he needs sleep, but he puts everything on himself. And Ellie says, "I got it, like you taught me to." Like she did. She goes through the checklist of everything she did while he was asleep and it's exactly what he's done. So he both wants to be proud of her, but also is just condemning himself for in his mind, failing Ellie again. At every
Hmm.
turn, he's failing her. And obviously this is going to come to play later when he asks Tommy to take her. It's so hard to watch Joel struggle because of everything he's been through and the amount of guilt he must feel for what happened to Sarah. to then have it replaying, I'm sure, over and over and over again in his head with
Mhm.
Ellie, it's brutal.
Yeah. And I love the fact that he is putting so much pressure on himself over the things like he feels like is a failing in the fact that he fell asleep, but he's not looking to the positives in the fact that he's trained Ellie so well to the point
Mhm.
where Ellie managed to do everything that he would have done had he been awake. And he managed to also get some sleep, which should have been the benefit of training her and making sure that she can fend for herself. I wonder if it's just a protective fatherly thing of just not wanting the little one to fly the coop, almost like I've got to hold them close and protect them that way. And I mean, Joel hasn't experienced that with Sarah, and I'm sure that there is the fact that he never will experience that with Sarah. So that ultimately, kind of, I think the extent of growth is kind of limited because he is like, no, 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 you keep them close to you, and then when they're close to you, they're safe. As we know, that's not always true in this world that we're kind of experiencing with The Last of Us. But it's a shame that he can't see the benefits in what he's done. And again, just adds this layering of Joel just feeling as if he's messing up constantly.
Damn.
You're no Will Livingston.
Yeah, but who is? So that made electricity?
Yeah. Don't ask me, I don't have a clue.
You know, you could have just made something up. I would have believed you. Look at that river. It's crazy blue. Hey, Joel, what if this is the river of death?
We get them then heading into the wilderness of Wyoming and eventually coming to not one bridge, but two bridges or two rivers at least. And from when they first thought was the River of Death, no, second one's the River of Death. And this is where things get a bit spicy. Along the journey, we get some really lovely scenes of like Ellie trying to whistle, which for me is I'm always taken back to the West Wing. There's a great line of President Bartlett giving some fatherly advice, and he goes, "Teach he talks to someone and he says, "Teach your daughter how to whistle. Her mother won't do that." And it just seems to be like kind of one of those very kind of like dad-like things of like, "Oh, I'm going to teach my kid how to whistle." And Ellie's the one that's almost like begging for Joel to be a bit of a dad in this bit. Like, I can't whistle. And it's almost like, come on,
Mhm.
Joel. You got to step in there, right?
Well, yeah, because we saw the night before when she's standing up on the big rock looking at the aurora borealis, he whistles at her and tells her to get down. And I
Hmm.
can't help but think that then her hearing him whistle is what wanted her she wanted to whistle now. She wants to
Hmm.
learn how to hunt. She wants him to teach her things. And he's very hesitant to do so. I think for obviously multiple reasons, teaching her to hunt would then also involve her having her gun out more, putting her more at risk. Um, I think he wants to avoid all of those things. But the whistling scene always gets me, especially because it's kind of pulled straight from the game. This happens in game two, and I just love it. It's such a childish thing to just be like, oh, we're walking. I might as well try to learn to whistle.
Hmm.
It's a really fun like character beat for Ellie. But yeah, encountering the folks from Jackson at the dam and the dog sniffing for the infection, which again we saw in the very first episode when the with the neighbors next door, that dogs are able to kind of sniff this out. And Joel he's stunned, he can't do anything. But why
Hmm.
would he be able to do anything? It's not like his age or hearing has any difference in what the result of this would be if the dog were to sniff the infection on Ellie. No person would be better equipped to handle this. In fact, Stuart, it's the fact that he's connected to Tommy that saves them at all.
Yeah. And it's kind of remarkable that I think that Joel is just finding anything to be a failure on his part. Like I think the fact that Ellie is the one that suggests like maybe this is the river of death, and he hadn't contemplated that. And it's when he was checking the map and kind of hastily walking, and the way in which he grabs her and tries to run, but then is cut off. I feel like he feels as if maybe he should have been more prepared. Kind of like with Kansas, maybe he should have been more prepared for hunters and for that whole situation. I think there's a lot of that coming up. But like you said, if it wasn't for Tommy and that connection, he'd be completely screwed. Thank the Lord that Maria was one of those people there. Otherwise, I mean, that could have gone south so quickly. The guy that was doing the kind of questioning, he had no patience for anything that was going on. And based on what we come to know about Jackson, I wonder if maybe they might have got away with it somehow. Like maybe they wouldn't have, maybe they would have got to the Tommy of it all later in the conversation. Maybe there wouldn't be the immediacy of kind of Maria going, hold on, I know Tommy's got a brother, and this guy's looking for a brother, and he kind of looks a little like Tommy. So maybe like kind of they would have got there eventually, but certainly having that connection, having Maria be there immediately makes things go a lot smoother. And we get our first look at Jackson.
Tommy! What the fuck you doing here?
I came here to save you.
This is something that I am so pleased about the adaptation, because when the whole thing was announced, I was desperate to see Jackson. I love it as a setting, and we only get it in game 2. We don't get this in game 1. And so it's a great way, because game 1, we have the Tommy interaction where they're trying to fix up the dam. The hydroelectric plant, they've appropriated to like kind of steal the electricity from the hydroelectric dam, and they're trying to fix it, and then raiders come and it's a big shootout. And instead we don't get that. We just get this wonderful little commune that is protected with high walls surrounded by mountains in the most picturesque part of Wyoming I've ever seen. I love Jackson so much.
It's so beautiful. It's like a utopia in this sort of a world. And it just has everything. The idea that Joel is coming to save Tommy and then finds Tommy that has already been saved and is already in pretty much the best living situation he could be in. He's in
Mhm.
love. He's married. He's going to be a father. Like everything is looking up for Tommy. Everything's showing Tommy right now. And it's I love the way they adapted the reunion between Joel and Tommy. Um, I think Pedro Pascal, God, the emotion on his face when he just yells out his brother's name and then they hug, and the look on
Mhm.
Ellie's face when they hug of like, oh no, he has someone else. Like
Mhm.
whether that reads as jealousy or he could leave me for Tommy, like he could just ditch me now that he has Tommy, he doesn't need me anymore. Um and or jealousy of he has a person and I don't, he has a relative and I don't. There's so many ways you can interpret it, and all of them could be true also. But it's just such a perfect scene. This is what Joel has been working towards since episode 1, and he gets it.
Yeah. He finally succeeds at something, and of course, it's fine. Certainly nothing wrong beneath the surface. We get a lovely reunion. Um, the way in which, yeah, like you said, that Pedro Pascal plays this is fantastic, because in the game it's very kind of hostile, almost like immediately. It's very kind of standoffish. We do
Very like
get
tough guy bro energy.
yeah, like it's very kind of like yeah, let's
Men
go
being
talk.
men.
Yeah. And then in this one, we just get like a full on, oh, I've traveled across the country to find you. Of course, I'm going to be happy to see you. Like, and I know that there's history, but ultimately, my big brother, I'm going to rush down and give you a big hug. And I love the fact that Joel is the one to run towards Tommy as
Tommy!
well. And
The way
yeah,
he
and the
says
fact,
it, oh, I can't.
and he's just, like, we see Joel smile. Like
So rare, right?
it's wonderful. It's just you see a little sliver of like pure, I think, happiness and joy from Joel, and it's kind of lovely.
Mhm.
And then we cut to the dining hall. For reasons, fairy lights, everything. Game 2. We'll get on to that when I'm sure that episode comes up. But we won't spoil anything too bad. But yeah, we get Joel and Ellie having their first meal in ages, scoffing it down like they were like animals with cutlery. They were just non-stop with it, which is
Mhm.
so good because I mean, this is the first proper food they've had in ages.
The first time they probably sat at a table in a while, you know? Like,
Yeah,
I love Joel immediately having those, like, Texas manners and Ellie just not, and not
yeah.
really caring, and having seemingly a hostile attitude immediately. Not towards Tommy, but towards Maria, I feel like. I
Hmm.
think she senses Maria and Joel, there's something not quite right about, like, the energy between those characters, and naturally, she is defensive of Joel, and she wants her gun back. She yells at a girl for staring at her for too long, you know? Like, there's a lot going on here, and when Joel asks for, like, a minute for family, and we find out, "Oh, Maria and Tommy are a thing. They're married." And then Ellie have to be the one to prompt the, "Joel, say congrats." You don't have
Hmm.
manners, say congrats.
I love these additions that they've made for the show. Like when she's trying to defend or not defend when she's trying to explain to Henry that Joel just like talks like that. He's a bit of an asshole. Like tell them that everything's fine, and then Joel's like everything is fine. He just says it through gritted teeth because Ellie's telling him to do it. I love she's doing it again, but just in the social scenario of just like say congrats, and then Joel
Well,
just go congrats.
tell me
It's
it
just
doesn't read like Sarah mother henning Joel in the first
hmm.
episode, and Tommy recognizes that. Tommy was there in that
Yeah,
scene. He immediately latches on to, like, I see what's going on here.
yeah.
I see that this is someone you care about. And there is a back and forth here that is familiar. It is only a joking that you do around with someone that you are very familiar with and that you care about, and Tommy recognizes that. And I think then the complications between all four of these characters in this scene together is so wild, right? Because then we have, oh, well, now Maria is now Tommy's family, which is encroaching in on Joel's turf, which then subsequently is encroaching in on Ellie's turf.
Hmm.
So it's a little bit of like, there's a lot of tension here. And yeah, we of course, under all this tension now, we get a tour of Jackson, and we get to hear the ways in which this settlement is thriving. It's been 7 years. They rarely see infected. They only see them in small pockets. Tommy's bragging about how far away he can shoot one, you know, "Ooh, I get a headshot from this far away." Uh, they have sheep, which Ellie loves to point out, "Oh, Joel, they have sheep for
Yeah,
you."
so funny.
We find out that Maria is an elected official. I love Tommy trying to downplay that they live on a commune and Maria being like, "Nah, it is a commune."
We're communists. So good because it's such a like you absolutely know that it's one of those things, especially with like a 2000s Texan living like former vet who would have absolutely been downtreading to like the word communism without fully understanding the virtues of something like this, which works entirely for a small little settlement that they are in, where they have to share resources, they have to get along, they have to do what they need to do. And that realization from Tommy is so funny. It's just the way he literally stops where he is, because not only has Joel got one over on him, Maria's then corrected him, and he's like almost like reshaping his whole worldview. It's like,
Mhm.
oh, I'm one of I am I a liberal? Like,
Well, yeah, that's
it's
exactly how it is. Because keep in mind, like you said, they're not just in America; they're from Texas. Like this is far, far removed from, I would assume, how most of the culture in Texas was prior to Outbreak Day. And on top of that, when you think about the fact that Tommy, Joel, and Tess were in like a band of misfits that were really awful. They did some really bad
Mhm.
things. And they go from that to living on a commune. And like
Yeah.
that's a big, big, big difference. So I love the tour, especially like you said, because we get to see Jackson and we get to see this entire thing. They have lights, they have movies, they have
Yeah.
stables, like they have everything. They have livestock. We go to the Tommy and Joel bar scene and they talk about we have pigs, we're gonna have bacon. What more could you want?
It's a wonderful scene. And it is this real thing of, well, okay, what are the fundamentals in life? Like, yeah, okay, you want safety, security. Once you've got that, what are the extra special things that just make it? And it's this lifestyle that I think many people kind of idealize, in that it's just a simple lifestyle where I'm going to appreciate the real things. And I think this is that kind of embodiment of that. That I think a lot of people have. It's just like, I want to get away from modern life. I want to get out into the sticks, and I want to work and like be one with the land and have that kind of lifestyle. And this shows that that can be done in a supportive community like this. I love the fact that they kind of explain how everything does work. I love the fact that Maria mentions that they do have a jail, but they haven't had much need for it because, of course, in a small settlement like this, why would there be crime? Like, I'm sure that
Yeah.
everything is kind of arbitrated by this little elected council that they seem to have, which works really well. You
Yeah, they
get
have an
to-
answer for every question, right?
yeah.
Ellie says, "Oh, well, we've heard that like you leave the dead out there for people to find." And it's like, "Yeah, so they know not to F with us. We're trying to protect our land. We're very
Mhm.
careful with who comes in. We don't use the radio," which explains why Joel didn't hear from Tommy. It's for every question they have, Maria is prepared with an answer for why it is that they follow a specific set of rules that they have, and it's to
Mhm.
keep them all safe. And it sounds great. Like, you can't really poke holes in any of it.
You really can't. And I think it's so good, just the way in which, like, kind of again, we then have the split where Joel and Tommy then go off to the bar, and then we get Ellie once more feeling as if she's being abandoned and being left with Maria. And it's quite funny that we get the two people that are vying for the other one's kind of affections in the way, because I almost get like Maria is kind of vying for Ellie's affections in the sense of like, you're young. I see risk for you because you're with Joel, and I've heard stories from Tommy about Joel at its worst. Therefore, I want to protect you. So therefore, I'm kind of like vie for your affection, attention, kind of thing. Joel, on the other hand, is doing that entirely with Tommy. So they split off so that they can do their work in pairs of just trying to like befriend the other one. The conversation with Joel and Tommy at the bar, though, with Tommy's revelation about becoming a father, and that conversation, it was so tough because Tommy's excited, quite rightly. Like, he wants to tell his older brother, like, I'm gonna have a family. Like, things are good here. We don't have to go in pursuit of all these weird world-saving events. We can just stay here and we can just be happy. But Joel, being Joel, he's fixed on his mission because he's made a promise, but equally he's also very angry because Tommy is getting what he doesn't have, which is a daughter or a child, and like an attempt at life. And yeah, it leads to a very uncomfortable conversation between the two of them, which is leading to Joel
Yeah.
storming out.
It really feels like the way Joel views it, he lost everything on Outbreak Day, and there's no getting any of it back. His life ended that day, and he
Hmm.
can't move forward, and he can't have anything good. And Tommy, on the other hand, is seemingly thriving, currently at least, right? It took him a long time to get here. Let's not, it took him 20 years to get here, but he's
Hmm.
in a place where he's happy. He found a
Yeah.
partner. He's going to be a father. Everything is looking up for him. And of course, Joel is going to resent that and resent that it's happening for Tommy and not for him. Resent the fact that Tommy was able to do this without his help, I think is
Yeah.
another thing, right? They were a pair for so long. And resent the fact that now Joel needs Tommy's help. And I think in Joel's mind, it was always, he's the older brother. He's always helped Tommy. He's always been there for him. He kept him safe for years during this outbreak. And
Even before, like even in episode 1, like when he turns up and he's like, "No, he doesn't love me. He's relying on me."
bailed him
Like
out of
it's
jail. Like,
yeah.
time and time again, Joel has sacrificed himself for Tommy, and Tommy is not willing to do the same here. When Joel
Mhm,
says Ellie is the lies, says Tess is fine, Ellie is like, some big wig's daughter in the Fireflies, and we need to get to the base out in eastern Colorado at the university. And he needs Tommy's help, but Tommy says he can't leave because he's going to be a father. Obviously, this is a difference from the game. In the game, Maria really doesn't have much of a personality. She's mostly meant as kind of like a foil.
mhm,
And yes, she's with Tommy, but she's not pregnant in the game. And I like this adaptational decision to have her be pregnant.
mhm,
I think it causes way more friction with Tommy and Joel than is there otherwise. And I also think like it's the worst when you can see both sides of the argument and both people are right. You understand Joel's just how heartbroken he is over this. You understand that Tommy can't leave. He has a
mhm,
baby on the way, you know? And it's really really hard to see him say just because life stopped for you doesn't mean it has to stop for me. Cuz it's real, that's true. But it's still a lot for Joel to have to hear, and he
mhm.
has another panic attack, and this time, he thinks he sees Sarah, which is so heartbreaking. Like, it's so heartbreaking because Stuart, he's in this, like, utopia. So, of course, his brain is gonna be like, "But what if?" And, like, have all these, like,
Mhm.
magical inclinations of, "What if Sarah's here?" It's heartbreaking.
Especially the fact that the person with the similar hair to Sarah seems to be embracing a small child, and it looks as if like it could be like a mother-daughter situation. And so Joel might kind of just think, "Oh, she probably would be old enough now to have a daughter of her own potentially if she lived in a place like this, if she had lived." And so it just forces him to confront so many feelings that he has bottled down, hasn't thought on, hasn't processed, hasn't, I think, grieved to the point of ending that grieving process. Not that grieving ever truly ends, but I think it kind of it gets to a point where you get towards the end of the cycle of grieving, and it becomes something that becomes much more dampened and long term. And Joel's never got to that point because he's just put it away. And I think he's replaced one trauma with another, and then traumas have just escalated ever since in this world. It's so horrible. And to have that happening at the time when he's having a panic attack about like an argument with his brother
Mhm.
is just it's so tough to watch.
It almost feels like he's been dissociating for 20 years. And
Hmm.
now that he's finally let someone in Ellie, he's just now processing all the grief he went through 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Um it's really hard to watch, and again, Pedro Pascal is just incredible. I really struggle watching people have panic attacks on television because I went through a really bad bout of having panic attacks, and let me tell you, they're really not fun. Um, it's really hard, no matter what methods you use, it's still really difficult to calm yourself down, and especially when it is something so deep down dark down inside of him that has been
Hmm.
shoved down there for 20 years. He has a lot of stuff he has to deal with.
Yeah. It's really rough.
Look, I'm not going to ask you what you're doing with him.
Good.
But there are clearly things you don't know about Joel.
Oh, like how he used to kill people? I know about that.
So then you understand my concern.
He doesn't do that anymore.
He stopped killing people?
Innocent ones. And Tommy did it too. Are you worried about him?
Tommy was following Joel. The way you are now.
Well, maybe I'm smarter than Tommy. No offense.
You are definitely smart. Would have made a hell of a lawyer. There's a whole lot you're not telling me. Good. Herein lies the point. Be careful who you put your faith in. The only people who can betray us are the ones we trust.
And on the other side of town, Ellie and Maria are having a hoot. it's no. Ellie is kind of being looked after. Like Ellie's been shown like sort of it's given a place to kind of shower and like get changed. Maria seems to be finding her all sorts of things in terms of like new clothing. Seems to trading for a big fucking purple coat, which is very purple. We get the same Neapolitan hooded like jumper that we get from the
Yes.
game, which was a wonderful callback as well. Really ugly, I think, jumper, but is reminiscent
That
of the
is
game.
iconic.
It's iconic, yeah. I mean, I don't think you can't. If like immediately, it's like it's nice to have all these good nods to the video
Mhm.
game, and for it not to feel ashamed that it was a video game adaptation. I get a lot of media sometimes does this, where like The Witcher, for example. I know The Witcher is also like a series of books that was then a video game and then a TV show, and the TV show clearly resented that it was ever a video game and wanted to disassociate itself from it, which is why that
Mhm.
show fell to absolute crap because it wasn't loved by the people that were making it, whereas this obviously completely does.
Mhm.
So Ellie's kind of cleaning up, and she sees as she's kind of like drying her hair and walking through this space, chalkboards, which is a little kind of memorial to Kevin and Sarah, and the dates on the death seem to be on Outbreak Day, 20 years ago, which is not a nice thought that we've got two names to put up on the chalkboards. We know about Sarah, but we don't know about Kevin. And it's not until we get a haircut with Maria that we find out who Kevin is and what the situation there is as well.
Yeah. It really, again, I like getting this a little bit more about this character, Maria. In the game, we really don't get a ton.
Hmm.
So, and again, I'm just going to point out we have another woman in power, which I love, another influential person for Ellie. She's trying to give her advice, right? She said, like, we find out she was previously an assistant district attorney
Hmm.
and Kevin was her son. He died on Outbreak Day. Ellie finds out Sarah is Joel's daughter. And while at first she's a little like taken aback, I think like she says it makes a lot of sense now. Like she understands a lot more about Joel just from this one little fact. And Maria tries to tell Ellie, like, listen, I know you're smart, but watch out for Joel. Like, do you know he's killed people? Yeah, he doesn't do that anymore. At least not the innocent ones he doesn't kill.
Hmm.
And because Maria, again, and she calls out Maria rightfully so for her knowledge is secondhand. It's coming from Tommy. Uh,
Hmm.
Ellie has traveled with Joel for months now. She knows who he is. And
Yep.
I like Maria. I get really annoyed when we get characters who tell people to not trust people, but then get annoyed when that character doesn't trust them. So I
Hmm.
appreciated the fact that Maria is like, good, you didn't tell me everything because the people that are going to hurt you are the people that are close to you. So be
Yeah.
careful. I think it's sage advice, not unlike I feel like there's Maria Tess connections that we could draw. And I appreciate that Maria understands that of course Ellie is not going to immediately trust her and that makes her very smart and very resourceful in terms of survival.
Yeah, completely. It's a great way of showing that it's just not patronizing. It's not like, kids, you should listen to what I'm saying because I'm older and therefore an authority on the matter. Like
Mhm.
Maria approaches it from a really kind of like I think a logical point and is aware that if Ellie has survived this long out there, admittedly with Joel's protection, but still has survived this long, she's already got street smarts herself, so she understands like what trust is. And what she's saying is just because someone is protecting you and stuff doesn't mean you should necessarily trust them to the fullest extent. And she's just saying, just keep your wits about you and don't be blinded by that, which is, I think, a great touch. One of the other things I really liked about this scene in particular, especially with like the memorial, is the fact that it was Tommy who made it, which is a sweet thing in the fact that obviously he's kind of heard Maria's like story of like her child that's died, but equally Tommy is also grieving Sarah as well and feels that loss, and it's a great touch because it's not there. Like, how do you really convey that when in a world where photos aren't too prevalent? I don't
Right.
imagine that Tommy would have photos of Sarah.
No, he was in
Obviously,
jail on Outbreak Night or whatever, right? Like he wasn't
exactly.
around.
Yeah, he didn't have enough time to like pack a grab bag and
Maybe he
get
had a wallet
going.
photo and that's about it.
Maybe, yeah. But like at the end, like for this, it's a great way of showing that like it's not just something that sits on the mantelpiece and is forgotten about. Like Tommy's taking the effort to do this, so Tommy is clearly thinking about Sarah and is saddened by it and is willing to kind of make a little memorial, which means that he hasn't fully moved on. And I think the way in which Joel is projecting that he's just starting a new life and getting on with it. No, he's grounded in the reality of, well, I'm life goes on, but it doesn't mean that the old stuff isn't there and isn't present. It just
Mhm.
shapes what comes forward as well. We also get like Maria, just I think, as well as the good advice, I think just really looking out for Ellie in the ways in which an older woman should look out for a young girl in this world of like giving her a haircut, getting her a big coat, giving her the moon cup. Like there's so much stuff that is absolutely necessary.
Mhm.
And like Ellie's reaction to it and just playing it, just going, ooh, gross. It's just so
It
funny.
is gross, Ellie. It is gross. Thank you for noticing that. Um, no, I especially like that they made Maria pregnant and also have give her the history of losing a child.
Hmm.
Because I also think you can draw some parallels between her and Joel, where
Hmm.
Joel is so resistant to the idea of having any sort of relationship that is even remotely like a father-daughter relationship with Ellie, whereas Maria is now pregnant with a child. And you have to imagine there's absolutely no way Maria feels 100% like totally fine. She feels no guilt at all. She's la di da, like I'm pregnant. I'm the happiest person in the world. Yes, I'm sure she's extremely happy and like excited, but there's a piece of her that feels guilt and remorse for the child that she lost. And what would Kevin have been like as a bigger brother? You know what I mean? Like, she's thinking of those things, but I think we see Maria as kind of like what Joel could have been, could be in an alternate universe where Maria has moved on. She is in a position of power in a thriving society. She has a partner. She has a baby on the way. All of these things are great things. Joel doesn't have
Hmm.
any of that sort of thing. He's very resistant to forming new connections. So it's really interesting to look at those two characters as taking different paths, even though their outbreak days maybe started very similarly.
Yeah, and of course, like circumstance comes into it. Location, I imagine, certainly kind of played a factor into kind of like how brutal perhaps everything after Outbreak Day was for particular people in terms of like getting caught up in the Fedra of it all and things like that. But ultimately, I think, yeah, you're completely right. It highlights just this worldview change in that Maria has grieved and is moving on and is able to kind of create with this kind of like path that she has gone down. Whereas Joel, on the other hand, life has stopped and there's no progression. There's just this kind of dwelling on the sadness of everything.
Not unlike the watch that he has. That's always stopped forever.
It's again, it's just so good how this comes together, right?
We're freaking out. Yeah.
Hmm. Oh, I love this so much.
And I have dreams. Every night.
What kind of dreams?
I don't know. I can't remember. I just know that when I wake up, I've lost something. I'm failing in my sleep. It's all I do. It's all I've ever done. It's failure. Again and again.
You want me to take her?
I'm just gonna get her killed. I know it. I know it. And I have to leave her.
Joe,
I mean, it's why you took off on me, right? To make up for the things we did. Well, here's your chance to bring your kid into a better world. You're younger than me. You're still strong. You said it yourself. You'll come back. You have to take her. You can't tell anyone, not even Maria. Tommy, you're the only one I trust. If anyone else sees those bites on her, what's under her skin, they'll shoot her. It's the last thing I'll ever ask of you. I swear.
And then we get Tommy making amends. We get well, we get Eddie going to go watch a film with the rest of the kids. This is again another kind of just it's just so lovely the fact that like they've got the essentials, they've got safety, security, and now they're doing just the little extras. So what are we going to get? We're going to get bacon, whiskey, and cinema. Top tier. Sign me up. Send me the Jackson right now.
It's very
Like, I love-
American, right?
it really is actually.
I feel like they should have because we had the alcohol, right? Obviously the bacon is important. I feel like we could have gotten a nod to coffee, especially because Joel loves coffee. Because
Mhm.
Americans love coffee. We're obsessed with coffee because we're all over caffeinated monsters. So that would have been fun. But I'm they didn't need it. But yeah, these are the
Yeah.
things that Americans like, all wrapped into one.
Exactly. And I love the fact that like again it's a very community thing. It's not just like, oh, we're gonna make the kids watch a film, it's just the kids watching it. All the adults are there, they're not sat down, they're offering their seats to the kids. And because it must be a wonderful thing for them to see that the kids are having a normal childhood, something that was probably denied for
Mhm.
many of them, that like probably come to like adulthood during the outbreak and everything, and have had kids since. And so of course this is kind of like, to them, this is the best gift that they can give them, which is just a normal evening at the pictures, which is again just quite lovely. And meanwhile Joel is away from that. He's away from the community, isolated, alone, miserable, trying to fix his bloody boots, which are unfixable, um, failing at that. But Tommy's the one that goes and makes amends, which I
Mhm.
think is just says a lot about their dynamic at the moment. That Tommy has to be the one to go and do that, and does so very graciously, I thought.
Yeah, he gets Joel to divulge Tess is actually dead. She's the reason I'm here. It was her like dying wish that Ellie get to the Fireflies, and uh, Joel owning up to his feelings of inadequacy, saying, I keep failing Ellie over and over and over again. She had to save me. Like I'm failing in my sleep. Like for him to say, when I wake up, I don't know what my dreams are, but I know I failed and I know I've lost something. Um it's heartbreaking, and I think there is a tiny bit of manipulation in it. Part of it is Joel opening up to his brother who loves him, and there is a bit of unconditional love there, right? There's baggage, but there's also unconditional love, so he can say all of these things to Tommy and bare his heart, but also using Tommy's upcoming baby against him in a way, and saying, if you bring Ellie to the Fireflies and they develop a vaccine, you could have a brighter future for your kid. You'd bring this kid into a
Mhm.
better world. It's a lot to put on Tommy. Obviously, these characters are flawed. They're not perfect. And there's a bit of manipulation to what Joel's doing. And there's a lot of manipulation to what Joel is doing. And some of it because he does feel inadequate and he does feel like Ellie is better off in Tommy's hands, and some of it because he's scared that he's getting too close to Ellie.
Mhm. Completely. And I think that fear is just so present. And I think that how Joel manipulates Tommy's feelings with the world he can offer his kid is so kind of so mean in a way, because it is like he's described Tommy before. He's the dreamer, like he's the one that wants to save the world. And although he has saved the world in the sense that like he's found this community, he's set up a way in which people can live in this world. I think that for for the moment, the fact that like Tommy is settling and is having a kid gives me the impression that Tommy has this feeling that he's saved the world, and Joel is the one to kind of just turn the dial a little bit and go, no, 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 you can really save the world this time by doing this. And it's so manipulative, and I don't think that Joel would do it unless Joel was really, really emotionally suffering, which is what he is doing here this entire time. Um, props to Pedro Pascal for not only acting this so phenomenally, but for improvising that line as well. It's wild that this wasn't scripted and that this wasn't like clever, like Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann going, yep, we're geniuses. We've laid this forever, all this failure and everything. No, it took Pedro Pascal to say, no. I have these. I feel like I'm waking up and I don't know. I don't remember anything, but I know that I've lost something. It's just so poetic in the delivery of it, and it's also not convoluted. It's not, it's not writerly. It's very honest. It's very kind of like brutal in the sense of like, I feel like I've lost something when I wake up, and for that to be just this absolute punch in the gut of just emotion is just so well done. And I can't imagine anyone else taking this role on after a line delivery like that. It's just,
No.
it's perfect.
And it makes so much sense too, I think, when you couple it with Joel's problem sleeping, the fact that he mumbles in his sleep, that Ellie has noticed that he mumbles in his sleep, the fact that he's having panic attacks. I've had moments where I've woken up and I know I've had a bad dream and I can't exactly put my finger on it, but there is an anxious feeling in my stomach and I know I've had a terrible dream. And again, like Joel just has so much going on. Everything is weighing so heavily on him. Of course, it's going to bleed into the time that you are supposed to be at rest, the time that you are supposed to be safest, right? Like I remember equating a lot. I really had a tough time with nightmares for a while and feeling like my own brain was attacking me when I was supposed to be getting rest was so frustrating and it makes you even more tired. So it's very obvious why Joel is so exhausted. And yeah, it is manipulative, but it also feels very true and very genuine that nothing he is saying is a lie. But he knows what to say to get Tommy to agree to this sort of thing. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, Ellie overhears some of it.
Yeah. The shot of Ellie just sensing something that's up, gets up and leaves the pictures, walks into Jackson on her own. Gorgeous shot of her walking through Jackson at night and with the kind of like the lights kind of just illuminating everything, just looks stunning. And we get the resolution to the Joel and Tommy of it all, and Joel makes his way off to, I think it was 38 that they're stationed down in, walks in, and the set is identical from the video game when they have
Shot
this
for shot.
conversation.
Yeah.
Shot for shot. And it is one of the scenes where I think fans would have rioted if they had deviated too far from the source material, because the original was stunning. And so what was there to improve? And yeah, we get Joel walking in to see Ellie having a bit of a history lesson in what teenagers were like in the early noughties.
So this
and
is
how
what girls
vapid
cared
society
about.
was. Yeah. There's a
what shirt
great
goes with what skirt?
yeah, there's a great shot earlier in the episode of like the little like pinboard that's within that room as well.
Yeah.
And it's like top 10 hot guys and a note from a secret admirer. And I think I saw like a sticker for Hocus Pocus, and I was like, okay, that's good. Everything else is vapid. But yeah, and Ellie quite rightly is just like, this is what they're worrying about. This is what they had to journal about. This is what they committed pen to paper over. It's such a different world. And sets Ellie off on a sense of frustration. It's a very quick and easy way of just like showing that she's not in the right headspace for this conversation, because Ellie is understandably upset. And it turns out that she heard absolutely everything that Joel and Tommy were saying, which is not good.
Maria told me about Sarah and...
No. Don't say another word.
I'm sorry about your daughter, Joel. But I have lost people too.
You have no idea what loss is.
Everybody I have cared for has either died or left me. Everybody fucking except for you! So don't tell me that I'd be safe with somebody else, because the truth is, I would just be more scared.
You're right. You're not my daughter. And I sure as hell ain't your dad. Now come dawn, we're going our separate ways.
And the worst part is, this is her exact fear of being alone and being ditched, and it's all coming true. And what Maria said, right? Like that is literally coming true the same day that Maria warned her that this sort of thing could happen. All of that is happening, and Ellie kind of using Joel's history against him. And while I do think she's being honest and true and trying to get in through his head that I'm not your daughter, the same thing won't happen to me.
Hmm.
I do think there is a slight of like, I know. I know you didn't tell me. Like, I know about your daughter and I know you didn't tell me and I know that's why you're acting this way, and kind of
Hmm.
using it as like a barb against him. Where she's, I'm sorry about your daughter, Joel, but I've lost people too. Oh, like, it's true though. That's the thing.
Hmm.
These characters are so flawed. I feel like I am at my most angry with Joel, at least in game 1, when he says you have no idea what loss is.
Yeah.
Um it's so unfair. It's so unfair to say to
It's
Ellie, who's lost everyone. It's so, and especially there are people he doesn't even know about that she's lost. Like, you don't know this kid's entire history. It's so unfair to say to her.
yeah, it's patronizing. It doesn't observe that Ellie is a complex human being who has their own history. And it's set up so well in both the show and the game, because in both we see Joel's trauma. We see everything that has happened. We're introduced to Ellie in the midst of this story. The only traumas that we've seen that Ellie has experienced, we've seen Joel experience in the same way, except we've seen Joel experience and have reference to additional traumas. As far as we know, Ellie grew up in the QZ of Boston, raised by Frederick. It can't have been easy, but how much trauma can you really get when you're protected by that entity and you're in effectively
Mhm.
just a really toxic boarding school? So Joel, quite rightly, I say quite rightly, quite logically, I think, assumes that Ellie doesn't have the traumas that he has, and that he has seen more of this world and has experienced more of the hardships of it. And it's so tough, because I think, based on what we know in this episode, is that Ellie has traumas and that Ellie has experienced things. And everyone she said that everyone I've cared for has either died or left me, which for a kid to know and articulate is
Mhm.
so horrendous.
Yeah.
It's outrageous that Joel is so narrow-minded in
Uh,
thinking that he is the
Well,
worst person in the world in terms of trauma.
I don't even think he necessarily believes what he's saying either, because he
Yeah.
knows she's suffered loss. He's doing the petty, childish, immature thing of pushing someone away by saying things they know will hurt that person.
Mhm.
And especially when he says, "You're not my daughter, and I sure as hell ain't your dad." Like, that is, oh, what a gut punch. She is being vulnerable and saying, "I would be scared. Like, I would be more scared. I wouldn't be safer. I would just be more scared without you." And he is doing the very like, this guy needs therapy, but will do anything to go there sort of thing. And just pushing her away and saying, "Oh no, you're better off," when that's not the real reason. Like, sure, maybe there's a part of him that thinks I'm going to fail her and she's better off with Tommy, but I feel like it's more like 80-20. This guy is feeling like he's getting too close to Ellie and he's trying to save
Mhm.
himself. He's trying to save himself the emotional damage of what a relationship, what a fatherly relationship like could be like with Ellie. Um
Yeah.
yeah, it's a really, it's probably one of the best scenes in the whole show and the whole game. Like, it is an iconic one. I'm happy they did it shot for shot. nearly word for word. The only words they changed are
Mhm.
words that, in Craig Mason's, own words, wouldn't really work with Pedro Pascal playing Joel, which again,
Mhm.
it's an adaptation. You should make
Yes.
these changes. um, yeah, it's so good. It's played so wonderfully by both actors. I can't imagine anyone saying these words and meaning them in the care and thought and just emotion behind them. It's all so beautiful and it's so layered and so complex. Like these two characters are so fucked up. Like there's
Yeah.
so much there that they're both working through, and it's wonderful. It's great.
Yeah. And we'll get into the further kind of discussions on that in the spoiler section, but like you can see that there is so much behind what Bella Ramsey is putting into that line delivery, and it's just impeccable work, and it's wonderful to just see good people do good jobs in TV like this. It's just it's just let them cook, just let them cook. It's wonderful.
Mhm.
So then we cut away. The night ends. Joel is reminiscing about putting up a Christmas tree with Sarah, and actually, I think processing and allowing himself to feel that loss, because he maybe his mind is able to because he's in a safe environment. Like yes, okay, it's tough emotionally at the moment, but perhaps because he isn't having to worry about waking himself up if he does fall asleep. He isn't worrying about having to stay up and keep watch. Maybe that gives him the freedom to let his mind actually wander and to think about the past and to process. And of course, with everything that Tommy and Ellie have both said to him, I'm sure that kind of really does push that to the forefront. So we get that kind of little flashback scene of him and Sarah putting up Christmas decorations. But the following morning, we see Ellie awake, ready, packed up and ready to go, and Tommy's the one to pick her up. And silently, quietly, they make their way towards the stables, where they find Joel.
Okay, but before we do that, I'm mad. I'm big time mad at Joel because the audacity of this man to have theoretically, his final conversation with Ellie be, "You're not my daughter. You're leaving with Tommy at dawn." And we don't see anything of them together after. So we're led to believe that's the last conversation they have. And he's going to steal a horse and leave that as his final moment with Ellie. Joel, stop it. Stop.
He's I don't know why it's taking this long, Jess. Joel's a bad guy.
No. Okay, here's my problem though.
When it comes to
Played by
expressing
Pedro
his emotions.
Pascal. Okay.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Yeah.
He has that naughty knee that we all know about. Okay, that slutty little knee. And what am I supposed to do? I'm only human. Okay.
Mhm.
So, and he's like a daddy. Like, come on. We know he is.
It's deplorable that he was gonna do that.
Mhm.
It's horrendous that even well, this is the thing. This is him being single-minded. It's thinking about himself. It's thinking about survival. He's thinking about how can I get along without having to experience pain, experience suffering, and so he just runs away from his problems. Much the way in which I think he takes the easiest solution, the most direct solution in most cases, even though it's not necessarily like there are tough choices you can make that might hurt, but in the long term bring you benefit. Like perhaps stopping for that family, maybe it could have been something that yielded the benefit for them. But no, he was direct in the way in which he was going to save people. I think he's much in the same way for himself. So he makes really terrible choices, but it's not a good look when you tell a teenager, I'm not your dad, and then that's it. You bugger off with a stolen horse the next morning. That's not good. But
Yeah.
it goes better.
No,
It gets
we
better.
forgive him instantly, right? We forgive
Yeah.
him instantly because again, men need to go to therapy, okay? Instead of just saying the truth of, Ellie, I'm really sorry. You were right. I was wrong. We do have a father-daughter relationship. Let me take you to Colorado myself. Nah. Instead, he's like, Ellie, you should have the choice. Stop it. You stop it right. Hug her. Hug her.
Men will literally walk across the country, steal a horse, and then escape in the middle of the night instead of going to therapy. Like, it's just what
He's so broken. And immediately she just like shoves the bag in his arms and is like, let's
Oh.
go. We're
I
outta
think
here.
that's my favorite thing is that, like, yeah, you want him to give the kind of big emotional "I'm sorry" kind of thing, but Ellie doesn't need it. Ellie's just like, no,
Well, of course, they're the same.
this is enough. Exactly. I think she recognizes she doesn't
I'm
want him
mad. I'm mad, Stuart.
to. Well, yeah.
What
I
else is
mean,
new?
tough.
Yeah. But I also love the Tommy saying, "Well, I would have given you a horse. Like you didn't have to steal one." If there's a very brotherly thing happening here, where then Joel asks to borrow the gun again, like implying we will return to give you back the gun, but also throwing in that little barb of, "Well, Maria took mine," and he's like, "I already said yes, Joel. Here is the gun." Like it is very siblingy in a way that, again, like the injection of a little bit of levity is very much appreciated because the show is so heavy.
Yeah, and the levity doesn't need to be wisecracks left and right. It can just be little moments like that. It just gives you a little bit of like heartwarmingness of just like, oh, I recognize a familial kind of vibe there going on. It's quite lovely.
Wide right. You're flinching.
The target's too small.
I made it bigger than I should have. Eject the cartridge.
And I'm not flinching.
Mm-hmm.
Rifle just sucks.
Okay, give it.
Doesn't aim right.
Mm-hmm.
You'll see.
A deep breath in, slow breath out. You squeeze the trigger like you love it. Gentle, steady, nice and slow.
You gonna shoot this thing or get it pregnant? It isn't gonna work. It doesn't aim right. You dick.
And we get this kind of like episode closing vibe of them walking off into the distance. We get a shooting lesson. We get like some wisecracks between Joel and Ellie. It's lovely. This whole scene. Like, are you going to shoot it or are you going to make love to it? Just stellar line while Joel is teaching Ellie how to shoot, and you see that their relationship has clearly changed from this moment onwards. In that Joel is willing to embrace the connection they have. It may not be a father-daughter relationship. I think it's buddies on the road, and they're cracking jokes like the contractor. Like, oh,
Everybody loved contractors. That it still cracks me up every time. My dad was a contractor. He's now retired. If you want to count it retired as working on my house. But everybody loved contractors, and that hint of a smirk on Pedro Pascal's face when he says it. Chef's kiss. I love it. It's so funny. He's doing all the things that you would imagine he would have gotten to do with Sarah, teach her about football, teach her how to shoot, right? All these things that now he's getting to do with Ellie. And they have 5 days of this, right? Like we know it takes them 5 days to get to the point where they get to the college campus.
Five easy days, which
5
implies they've had
easy
a
days.
whale of a time.
Yeah, she's reading out of her joke book, Pun City. Like this is a fabulous time. They're bonding. It's great. Surely nothing could go wrong.
No, this is the episode close, right? This is like the vibes we're getting. Like it's a happy ending episode.
So sad.
Oh wait,
to get into sad stuff.
Oh wait, there's a whole another
I want to live here
10
for
minutes
a minute.
left. Yeah. This is the thing. If they'd like cut the episode here, I would have been so happy. But then they're like, no, this is The Last of Us, and we're gonna remind you it's The Last of Us, everyone.
Yeah.
We get them arriving at Colorado, going through the campus, finding that it's completely abandoned. Although there are signs that the Fireflies have been here. There's the signature Naughty Dog yellow kind of color marker for like where to go.
They must have had so many
breaking some symbols.
stencils. So many
So many
Firefly
stencils.
stencils. Yeah.
Yeah, like I think Banksy must have been a Firefly. Like it's just been like, guys, this is how you do it, right?
Yeah, and they all, I think you could tell the mood shifts immediately when they see their guard stations, but no guards. It's too quiet, And immediately both of them go from laughing and joking about the contractor to
Mhm.
this is serious, let's get our guns out. And yeah, it goes from fun lighthearted to uh-oh, like where are the Fireflies? It looks like they made a packing list, but this isn't a good situation to be in. And in the game we spend a lot more time roaming around. We're like listening to little voice recorder memo things.
Mhm.
It's very quick in the show where it's like almost immediately there are men who attempt to attack them. They're raiders. They're trying to attack them. And instead of Joel falling on a piece of rebar, he gets stabbed with the end of a baseball bat.
Yeah. I understand the practicality of this choice. Obviously, this must have saved a
Mhm.
lot of money in production, but that fall onto the rebar is just when it happens in the game, I don't think there's a more shocking moment because you're there going, "Oh shit, Joel's dead." Like Joel is
What do
dead.
we do? Yeah, and
Yeah.
Ellie has to
What?
help him up, and, like, there's a very prolonged sequence of Ellie
Oh.
helping him out of the college campus. Like,
Mhm.
she kills 10 more? Like, there's so many people that she kills in that scene. You talk about Joel feeling guilt for Ellie having to, like, save him. She in the game, she saves him 20 times over in
Yeah.
just one scene.
This is, I think, one of the few instances where I'll be very much like normally I'm kind of like, well, let's be a bit more measured. Like, hey, it can be like, I think in some aspects the game's better, sometimes the TV show's better.
Mhm,
I think
mhm.
in this aspect, the game is 100% better because we have the whole like your vision's hazy, you're staggering around, the camera view is staggered. You don't, the controls are really sluggish as well, and it just conveys this feeling of like, oh crap, I'm bleeding out and I'm dying, and there's this kid, and we see Ellie coming to her own in terms of like combat as well. She's the one that sneaks around and flanks the guy, and like takes out the switchblade,
Yeah.
stabs, and
The
is more
entire time
dexterous.
she's yelling at Joel, "Come on, Joel, come on!" Like
Yeah.
yelling at him to keep moving. Let's go. Like really pushing him and taking
Hmm.
charge in a way we really haven't. It's almost like Joel trained her to finally do this to where now she feels confident enough to take charge herself. Or maybe she's just put in the situation where she has to, you know?
Yeah, and Ellie very much is almost like it reestablishes that kind of definition of their relationship as not being like a father-daughter relationship or a like carer and the caree kind of like situation. It's
Mhm.
very much like Ellie is saying, like she's offering Joel help. Joel's like, no, 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 and she's like, well, can you get up? And he's like, yeah, and she's like, well, then fucking get up. Like she's being, I think,
Mhm.
very combative with him, like kind of pushing him because she's like, this is life or death, Joel, and I understand this, but I'm the one that's in control here, and I've got to manage this,
Mhm.
and you're gonna have to answer to me and do it. And it's yeah, it's a phenomenal sequence in the game.
Yeah.
The TV show is just a flash, and it's a completely different approach that I do respect because I think that these kind of things would be a kind of blink and miss it, one mistake and that could be it for you. Just see your note on our little like outline document. Of course, he rips it out because it's TV, right?
This is not the main reason because of I like the character beats of Ellie taking control and Ellie stepping up and being the leader in this role and helping him. I like all those things from the video game, and that's why I wish it was on the TV that way. But my other reason is at least when he falls on the rebar, I mean, you can't take the rebar with you, so you gotta get up off of it. But
Yeah,
everybody knows, anyone who's seen any medical television ever knows if you get stabbed with something, don't just go ripping it out, okay? Like, we all know, and I'm not saying like he would have been better off if he left it in. Like, I don't really know. Like, they're not in a situation where he can like bop on over to a hospital and be fine. But this is just stop it. Stop ripping things out of yourself. Come on.
so I did see an analysis on this some time ago, and it was in some YouTube video that was like a medical professional talking about like the whole situation, and they were a bit 50-50 on whether or not it was a good idea or a bad idea of Joel taking it out, because on the good like sense, you leave it in, you're stemming the bleed, like you're not letting it kind of like bleed out. However, it's also like a really grubby world, and infections are very much a thing. So maybe it is kind of good to just get it out, let it bleed out, and like take out any kind of like impurities. I guess like shards of like wood that would perhaps be stuck in there and could
Big
get
ol'
infected.
splinter.
But well, yeah, the biggest of splinters. But I guess like there isn't really a right choice in that situation. I mean, you're fucked either
Well,
way, right?
true, and also, like, I think you could come down either way of, like, well, you could say, "Well, Joel's not a doctor, like, he wouldn't know," but also Joel has survived 20 years, and he's seen a
Yeah.
lot of shit, so he probably would know. Like, I'm not gonna nitpick it too hard. It's one of those things that drives me crazy on television, just like when people decide they need to, like, give blood in some way, and they cut the middle of their palm open as if
We
that is the
didn't even
best place
talk
to
about
cut.
that the other episode when Ellie
Ellie
did the
did it.
exact thing
I
with
try not to bring
Sam.
it up because people know I am annoyed by it. I bring it up on every show that it happens on, which is a lot of them, surprisingly.
Yeah.
It is something that annoys me on television. This also annoys me on television. It doesn't bother me as much. But yeah, and of course he is not looking great, and we see him and Ellie riding off.
hmm The ride off, Ellie's like shooting behind her, kind of making sure that they don't follow. And eventually they get out of Dodge, they end up on the train tracks, which I think is a really good choice as well, because it kind of, I imagine it would have masked the trail to follow as well, because I imagine that perhaps there could be multiple kind of people like taking that route if they are kind of traveling through. Snow probably doesn't settle as much, so there's not much of a track to follow.
Also, if you're
And
Ellie and you're the one kind of driving and steering, it's easier to follow train tracks and be like, well, this
yeah,
will end up somewhere.
exactly, yeah. Well, it would if Joel wasn't falling off the horse and dying. Um, and we get Ellie
So brutal.
just lost, just begging for Joel not to die, articulating that she is out here and she is alone without him, and
And
she
this is
doesn't
her
know what
biggest
to do.
fear. This is her
hmm
biggest fear, and also and I don't know if again, I don't know if she's learning this from Joel or it's just everything she's gone through that she has similar baggage in terms of losing people, but the way she phrases it of "I can't do this without you. I don't know where the fuck I'm going or what the fuck I'm doing." It's not you. It's not I'm losing you. It's not get better. It's
hmm
me. Me, which is both very teenagery to do and also just someone who's trying to put distance of like no, it's not that I don't want you to die and then I'm worried about your well-being. It's what about me? I think that you're putting
See,
a wall up there a little bit.
I took it like I do see that, but I also take it from a sense of like I think there's just a wall down between them that she can just be that vulnerable and just say without you I am screwed, and that like I'm worried for me if you die. Like I think there's a vulnerability
Mhm.
in admitting that weakness. I think as well. But again, it's a complex thing. I think it is kind of probably a bit of column A, a bit of column B.
Mhm.
And
If we really wanna go another step further, we could even say, and I don't necessarily think this is true at all, but we could say Ellie at this point knows that Joel is trying to protect her and cares about her, and so she's like, "What's gonna get him to actually get up and pay attention? The
true.
threat of me being in danger. Like, I'm in
I
danger, wake up."
I think it could be that as well. Column A,
Like, it's
B, and
just so
C.
complex. This is why it's so great, right? Like, it's
Mhm.
all of the above. And yeah, it's and this is like such a dark like imagine not having played the game and ending on this episode and you're like, they're not gonna kill Pedro Pascal, are they? They're not gonna kill Pedro Pascal. Come on. He's daddy. Look at that slutty little knee. He's not gonna
It
die.
would it would be such a funny thing to do to actually end the season there. I remember seeing like a weird reference, but like someone had recut Toy Story 3 when all the toys are in the incinerator, faded it to black, and then played the credits, and then they showed that version to their mum,
That's
and their mum was
incredible.
just traumatized. I imagine
Monster.
similar vibes if they had done it with this.
Yeah.
Because we could have had such a lovely episode, but of course we have to end on the trauma, and the trauma is compounded by the fact that we get yet again Depeche Mode's "Never Let Me Down Again" played. Only this time it's a slower version, a cover that's sung by Craig Mason's daughter Jessica, which is kind of a wild addition to this, but it really does capture the emotion of just it's sung in a weird hopeful sense of just I'm taking a ride with my best friend. They've reestablished that relationship. It's kind of like reformed, except it's a lot sadder this time
Mhm.
because of everything that's going on. Oh, it's a lot, and it'll
Yeah.
be fine. Sure, I'm sure it'll get better next episode.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. Who knows? We totally don't know what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, can we talk about some of the themes of this episode? Because
Hmm.
there's so many good ones. There's so many good ones. And they all obviously they all compound on each other. It's all pulling from like the buildup of the last, 5 episodes. But the idea of like family, found family, Joel reuniting with Tommy, which also further complicates his relationship with Ellie, and then by extension,
Hmm.
Maria. Like it's all so tricky. And yet no one's talking about that. No one's being like, "I'm jealous that you're back with your brother and you don't care about me as much." No one's doing that. Like no one has good communication, which just makes it that much trickier. But I just
Hmm.
love that, like, again, the idea of family versus found family and the Bill and Frank stuff. Like there's
Yeah.
it all compiles onto each other.
And it's so funny that like Tommy does try to weigh in on the whole like familial connection with Tommy. It's like, oh, let's just have a conversation with just family kind of thing. Completely glossing over the found family element of obviously Tess being his found family and that like Tommy even valuing that relationship and like checking in to see like how she's doing and why she's not here. Um it's kind of wild how Joel is so narrow-minded when it comes to it because it's like he's willing to kind of accept his own found family but isn't willing to acknowledge other people's which is
Mhm.
kind of wild.
Oh, a
I
little
love the fact
hypocritical. Sounds about right.
yeah, Joel, hypocritical, huh?
Never.
Never. But I mean, I don't think that he would be like this if he wasn't constantly feeling a sense of like fear and failure, right? He would
Yeah.
absolutely be more welcoming. I think he'd be much more open and lovely if it wasn't for the fact that everything has gone so badly for him ever
Yeah.
since the loss of Sarah. Like he has suffered, and it's one thing to say that, like, of course, his statement to Ellie that like, "Oh, you don't know what loss is a stupid thing to say because, of course, she does know what loss is."
Anyone in
But
this
like,
world knows what loss is. Like anyone who's alive post outbreak knows loss.
yeah, but like, let's not detract from the fact that Joel has still suffered and
Oh,
that
sure.
like his suffering is legitimate. It just, I don't think it's something that should be weighed up against the teenagers.
Yeah, no, it's just unfair. Of
Yeah.
course it's unfair, but like also the fact that his fear, which is, not being able to protect Ellie and not being good enough to protect Ellie, right? Like basically getting himself killed and that it's all for naught and he's not able to
Mhm.
help Ellie. When you weigh that up against Ellie's fear of abandonment and of being alone, like that's so brutal for him because like his fear would lead to her fear, like him failing is his biggest fear, which would then lead to her being alone of her biggest
Mhm.
fear. It's all too much. It's all too much. And yeah, just the lack of men going to therapy in this episode and not being able to like I mean Tommy surprisingly, okay, he has better communication than Joel at this point. But he's also in a better situation. But yeah,
Mhm.
the idea that Jackson represents kind of this utopia, right? Like
Mhm.
this hope. Um,
Yeah.
it's like the perfect encapsulation of Tommy as a character, where he's always been the one who's been optimistic and had hope and wanted to believe that we can move on and we can figure a way out of this all, right? Like we have to believe. Um, and Joel being the pessimist. "Oh, your dad's a real pessimist, huh? Oh, it's not my dad."
Mhm.
Um, it he's the pessimist, and so of course he doesn't quite fit in Jackson.
No.
He does feel like an outlier. He doesn't go to the community movie. He's by himself. He does feel like he's a survivalist. He's not someone who is used to this sort of community and this sort of hope and settling down.
Yeah, but it is essential at this point to show him it. And I think where I was previously praising the game with the whole situation of how they dealt with Joel's like injury. I think what they did better in the TV show is the fact that they showed Jackson, they showed Joel what he could choose. And it's
Mhm.
so effective to show him that hope and for him to experience it, to not engage with it by being the outlier, to be the one that doesn't engage with like the movie night, that doesn't that chooses to segregate himself away from Maria and have a very isolated conversation with Tommy. I think it's essential to show him that hope can be achieved and that especially with the conversations that they had earlier in the game with him and Ellie talking about what was going to happen after everything, because ultimately they are going to a point that has an end. They're going to get to the Fireflies, and they're going to, at that point, they're going to have a path to choose. What is that path? And it's essential to show Joel what there is and what can happen if he chooses it, and to present that to him. Yeah, I Jackson is just such a perfect way of, like you say, showing hope.
Mhm.
And I'm so happy that we got to see it. I'm
I know.
so
It was a really
pleased.
good choice. Um, and then of course, just the idea of trust and abandonment and how the people closest to you are generally the people that have the ability, have the ammunition to hurt you the most. And
Mhm,
while Ellie and Joel are kindred spirits in many ways and have bonded very deeply, um they there's just this inherent friction in them because of Joel's instinct to push people away and Ellie's fear of abandonment. Her trying to cling on while she does have some walls built up, she needs a person. She's not had a person to hang on to in a long time. And so how those two things are constantly at odds and butting up against each other is so interesting, and it seems like we've finally made a step in the right direction of Joel accepting that they have this bond and feeding into it, teaching her to shoot, teaching her about football. Finally kind of accepting that this is okay, that I feel this connection to this kid and it's not dishonoring the memory of Sarah. And that it's okay to move on a little bit.
mhm.
You don't forget the past, but we can move on a little bit.
We can. We can. Um, Banger episode, right? It's just a solid, perfect episode.
On the
Uh,
podcast, the official podcast for The Last of Us, they talk about how, like, it is, like, one of the least action-packed in terms of, like, actual fights and, like,
True,
um,
yeah.
them running into infected, but it is the most action-packed in terms of, like, emotion, and and it's so true. It's such a heavy, but, like, it's so chock full of, like, really important emotional beats.
Yeah, and there's not like any wasted time at all. I think
Mm-mm.
there's everything's afforded enough space to breathe, but again, in that breathing room, there's still a lot of like we've said that a lot in this episode, a lot of layering going on
Mhm.
everywhere. It's a very essential episode, and despite not having a lot of action, it's 100% necessary. Like, there's no way in which the season could have progressed without having this.
Mhm.
So yeah, as an episode itself, stellar is all I
Mhm.
can say, just top tier. Um, I think it's probably a good point to stop down before we jump into some spoilers. So if you are ducking out, please do subscribe. Look for the light on any podcast. Just give that a search. You can also find us on the socials at Look for the Light Pod. You can watch us on YouTube at Look for the Light Pod as well, where you can see our wonderful faces interspersed with a couple of quotes that we take from the episodes themselves as well. And of course, you can always email in your feedback at lookforlightpodcast@gmail.com. But for now, we'll jump into some spoilers. So there's a lot of spoilers to unpack here, Jess. Where do you want
I
to
was
start?
it was this was the roughest time I had in not talking about future things because there's
Same.
so many references.
I kind of
Yeah.
I pulled a crafty. I did make reference to a couple of things in game two, but I was like, small little details. But there's a lot of like substantial stuff
Yeah.
to mention, not only in the second game, but also in the later in the season, right?
Yeah. First thing I want to talk about is Ellie's fascination with space and astronauts and the Sally fucking ride.
Sally fucking
Um,
right.
I love this. I love it because of what we get in game 2, with the flashback of Ellie and Joel in the museum
Hmm.
and everything going on there. I love that it is a connection to Ashley Johnson, who voiced Ellie in the video game, and how she loves space, and so they wrote that in for Ellie.
Yep.
And the fact that it is a reference to Sally fucking Ride, who was not straight, and so this is a major allusion to Ellie's sexuality and what we're going to see with Riley. I think it serves so many purposes, and the fact that Joel knew who it was, like
Yeah.
he knew, oh, it's Sally Ride. Like he
Hmm.
knew, which is great.
That was, I think, my favorite part about that entire interaction is the fact that Joel knew it was Sally Ride. Like, not only knowing who Sally Ride is for one thing, like in the plethora of all astronauts that there are, like to like hone in on Sally Ride, but also to know that of course that would be Ellie's choice, because even though they haven't had the profound moment of like confronting each other on the emotional bit at that point, they're just on the road. They're just kind of, I think, at least on Joel's side of things, just not regretfully. What's the word I'm trying to think of? Just kind of begrudgingly enjoying Ellie's company. He can't help but put two and two together and think, and to kind of like understand Ellie's preferences with everything. That's incredibly wonderful scene. And yeah, like you said, the connection with Ashley Johnson and the way in which they chucked that into the game to reflect that and to
Mhm.
kind of further the connection between Ashley Johnson and this character, primo choice.
Yep. Uh Also the sheep farm, speaking of like wants, needs, whatever. Ellie's going to end up on a
Oh,
farm. Ellie's going to end up on a farm.
where they have sheep, and she's going to have some wonderful PTSD moments where she is reminded about a
Yeah.
certain event that happens very early on in the game. I don't know why
Yeah.
I'm speaking like coyly. This
Yeah.
is the spoiler section where Joel dies. That feels wrong to say. I don't know. I feel
can't
like
believe you just
I'm
said that
breaking
to
a
me.
rule. I know.
How
Can't
dare
believe that.
you? Stop.
But yeah,
Yeah.
it's just a great allusion to that, like to talk about like how, of course, in the game, like Ellie is taking on some of Joel's personality. Like there's a lot of like the guitar playing with the singing,
He
like
wants to be a singer, and she says he has to sing with her after. We know he's gonna do it. I can't handle it. I can't
I
handle it.
can't wait for that scene in
Stop it. I'm
season
not gonna
2.
make it. I'm not gonna make it.
Hmm.
Speaking of people that are around when Ellie sings, Dina.
Was that Dina?
Everyone thinks that it's Dina that's in the food hall that Ellie yells
Mhm.
at and says, "What are you looking at?" They haven't ever said, but the girl looks like what Dina looks like from the video game. So
It matches what Dina says as well to her
yeah,
in the game. It's just like this
yeah.
kid who just would eat really fast. Yeah, it's got to be right. It's got to be just a little nod. Obviously, it looks a little different than the Dina that was cast for season 2. But
But they didn't know it. Like they were, at the time they weren't going to cast Dina just for
Yeah.
like this one tiny thing. But yeah,
imagine being that extra though, getting that kind of minor non-speaking role and then not getting cast for season 2. That must be a real kick in the teeth.
that is so brutal now that I think about it. Oh no.
Yeah.
Speaking of game 2, Shimmer.
I was going to
Shimmer
say
makes her
other people that
appearance.
appear in game 2.
I
Somewhat
also
fleeting.
can't talk about Shimmer. Stop it! Stop it! How dare you? How
Hey.
absolutely dare! I was traumatized. Okay, beyond the bunny that happened in season 2. Or was it? No, was it? No,
Yeah,
was
the
it game
bunny.
1?
Game 1, yeah. Game
Okay,
1
that
is
was traumatizing. The bunny dying was so traumatizing. Shimmer dying, I was ill. I was not okay. I was not
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, it's. I can't make the joke I was going to make it. I think you'd actually shout at me.
Yeah, I'm already mad at you for even thinking of a mean joke to say. Yeah, and then there's also, we brought it up earlier, but the map trick will
Yeah.
come up later. Tell me your answer. Your answer better be the same as your partner's,
Mhm.
your other person's.
Somewhat more brutal later on. I'm glad that we
Yep.
get that in the show. We'll come to talk about when we get on to episode 8. Episode 8 is going to be a doozy when we come to cover that.
Stuart, we literally say this every single week. We're like, oh, this episode's gonna be so heartbreaking to talk about. It's like every single one is heartbreaking.
He's a cannibal.
I know, I know.
But yeah,
Um,
we
but
will
and then
get onto
the
that. But
more
I'm excited to look
broadly,
at that.
yes. More broadly in terms of like themes or things we're gonna see again that'll come back up. Ellie having a choice. I poked fun at it earlier, knowing that like this is Joel's way of getting around being like, I'm sorry, I'll take you. But the illusion of choice and body autonomy and Ellie being able to be the one to make a
Hmm.
choice, obviously going to be massive in the finale. The fact that she isn't given a choice, that they are first, they're going to essentially kill her to try to make a vaccine, and then Joel not giving her a choice and just stealing her away and lying to her.
Yeah.
A lot of moments with Ellie and choice coming into play soon.
Yeah, and a lot of like, I mean, Joel and choice in the sense that like he's being presented with one and he makes it on behalf of Ellie. Like it's one thing to say that like Ellie is not being given a choice, but Joel is certainly being given a choice and is certainly kind of asserting it as well. I'm sure
Mhm.
we'll have lots to say on that when we do come to that, which is only a couple of episodes away now. We're storming through these, Jess.
Yeah. Oh, one other thing too. One other thing. Joel saying, "Oh, you don't know loss." Well, we're gonna see it next episode, Beach. Okay, we're gonna see a
Mhm.
lot of loss for Ellie next
Get
episode.
yourself educated, Joel, because this poor girl, she's had some loss.
Yeah, Weepin knew.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's
Just
gonna be really
knowing
hard.
what episode you've got to watch next is, yeah. This show does not. It doesn't get better in the sense of just the brutality of it. You just got to strap in. You just got to
Every
experience it.
episode hurts more than the
Yeah.
last.
I'm so glad that we covered this so thoroughly. This episode in particular, for me, is one of my favorites of the season. I think it's one that I kind of do find myself rewatching more than others.
Are you okay?
I love
This is just this proves men will do anything not to go to therapy. Stuart just rewatches episodes of The Last of Us.
I live for the Jackson vibes. And also I'm a glutton for emotional punishment when it
Yeah,
comes
you
to
really
TV
are.
shows.
You're just like, punch me in the heart every day. Do it.
Yeah.
You won't.
Make me feel something. But unless you got anything else, Jess, should we wrap this up with a bit of Will Livingston?
Yes, please.
Amazing. So, why did Joel decide not to have a sheep farm?
He hates the smell of sheep poo.
Because he knew it was a bad investment. Thanks for listening, everyone. Bye bye.